Bomberman 64, The Second Attack, was such an underrated masterpiece. Whether you know anything about Bomberman, this game is still brilliant. You see, it was in that era of games when popular video game franchises were trying to take a leap into the world of 3D. Like Super Mario Bros. Became Super Mario 64, Sonic the Hedgehog became Sonic Adventure, Legend of Zelda became Ocarina of Time, and Bomberman became Bomberman 64. For most franchises during this time, it was a huge risk taker. Most companies didn't know what to do with a game in 3D. Luckily, for Bomberman, it worked. Bomberman had originally been a somewhat strategy-esque game where a player, or two players, or I think even four players, would take out a number of CPUs on a grid, or each other. With Bomberman 64, the game became more of a puzzle game, where a player would have to figure out how to move on to the next room or screen by utilizing different obstacles in the environment. Slap on some good music and a good story and you've got yourself a great seller. And that's exactly what happened. Bomberman 64 was pretty well received. Now, I never played Bomberman 64. The one I played was the game sequel, Bomberman 64, The Second Attack. My mom bought this for me when I first got a Nintendo 64, making it one of the first games I ever played. And to start with a puzzle-ish type of game, you bet I got lost. But I guess it didn't really matter too much, and I'm here to explain why, to this day, I still love and adore this game. Even if I didn't know how to play it at first. At the time, I didn't even know who Bomberman was. It was back in those days when you just bought a game because it had a cool title or a cool box cover or everyone else was playing it. Getting this game, I was instantly interested after I saw the opening cutscene of Bomberman's ship getting sucked into a black hole. Now, it's somewhat confusing at first, but I gotta tell you guys this really awesome gameplay mechanic. You get this little guy, or girl, or thing, named Pommy. Pommy is a humorous character who acts as a sort of guidance for the player, even though Pommy can't hurt enemies. That is, at first. You see, this is why Pommy is an awesome gameplay mechanic. On the Nintendo 64, it's somewhat difficult to find a game with co-op. You'll find many games with a versus mode, and many games today have a co-op mode, but back then, you really had difficulty finding a co-op game. Now, this game does have a versus mode, which I'll touch on later, but I'm going to touch on this game's cooperative play. So if your buddy was over, you and your buddy could play through this game together. In the beginning, Pommy can only stun enemies, which is helpful. But throughout the game, you can pick up different foods. These foods would cause Pommy to become all sorts of different things, making Pommy more, or sometimes less, useful. The more meat you got, the more Pommy would become a dragon or a dinosaur. The more fruit you got, the more Pommy would become a warrior or a wizard. Heck, you can make Pommy become a penguin, and a cat, and a devil, and an angel. And depending on what your preference is, Pommy can become extremely useful to the point where enemies can't even hurt him. In the beginning, Pommy can only stun enemies, but you'll have more fun with him as time goes on. Now, Pommy also can't get hurt. He can get stunned, but he can't get hurt. And if you don't like your buddy with whom if you don't have a buddy with whom you can play, then you can just set Pommy to a computer player. And if that annoys you, you can just set Pommy back to a second player and not control him. It's that easy. And if you didn't like what Pommy evolved into, you can always devolve Pommy back to his previous form by buying items in the game shop. And that's the next topic, the game shop. Yeah, a lot of it's useless, but there are some pretty cool items you can get in here. You can get extra hearts for Bomberman, you can buy movies that show you the upcoming attacks of bosses, and you can choose to buy an item that instantly gives you max power for any level you enter. How do you buy stuff at the shop? Well, you gotta earn coins by blowing up enemies. Enemies will drop power-ups, power-downs, food, coins, and sometimes absolutely nothing. But you can rack up the coins and buy any item that interests you. Oh, and so back to the actual gameplay. Your goal is to figure out how to advance onto the next room or screen by utilizing your environment. Usually this is done by defeating all the enemies in the room. Other times you might have to hit a switch, or bring a key, or defeat all the enemies in another room. You wouldn't be told what to do necessarily, and that's why this game is cool. It's difficult without being too difficult. It has a way of making you figure out what to do through its game design. Yeah, Pommy gives you hints during certain levels, and there are tutorials at the beginning of the game which are optional, but most of the time you have to figure out what to do by yourself. And as a kid, it was the most rewarding thing ever to hear that little jingle every time you did something correctly. Now, the game is 3D, but in the beginning, your bomb explosions go in sort of a cross shape. Like it only goes up and sideways, no diagonal. You can later gain the ability to throw and kick bombs. You can kick bombs into an enemy to stun them before the bomb goes off, and you can create bombs of large sizes. And when you create bombs of large sizes, they explode in a circular shape. Your explosion sizes differ based on how much firepower you have, so depending on your preference, you can get more firepower or you can decrease your firepower. And you can decrease your explosion sizes by picking up blue flames and increasing your explosion sizes by picking up red flames. You can determine how many bombs you can set by collecting different bomb-shaped items, similar to the original Bomberman games. You can decrease the amount you can set as well, but certain bombs can only be set one at a time. And I'll explain that later. There are also even items called the remote control, where you can tell when your bomb should explode. So you can set like 50 bombs and then press the Z button on your controller and all the bombs would just go off. It's actually pretty cool. But sometimes you can't use that item. You cannot use that item when you fight a boss. Now every level has a boss. Sometimes the boss appears really early in the level, other times just in the middle, and sometimes near the end. You never really know when the boss will appear, making it all the more suspenseful when a boss fight begins. Each boss also has a certain elemental power. The 7 elemental bosses have elements of fire, water, wind, earth, electricity, light, and dark. Each level is themed around the boss's ability, except for the first one. Yeah, the first level is a prison sewer area, yet the first boss controls fire. Later bosses have some really cool areas though, with some really cool music. Like the electric boss has a casino-based area, while the dark boss has a run-down, graffiti-full city, and the light boss has an amusement park. These are some of the greatest level choices. I have never seen a game with such a weird combination of levels, but it's cool. And the music is awesome too, just listen. But back to the bosses. All you have to do is avoid the boss's attacks and hurt him with your own. But be careful, these bosses can kick your bombs away if they want, and each one has a different ability too. Also, when you fight a boss, Palmy can't help you, and like I said before, you cannot use remote control attacks. Later bosses will even get one-hit KO attacks, which vary based on which boss they are. Sometimes I just like killing myself just to see what the attack is. And with the exception of the first level, each boss will give you an elemental stone every time you complete a level. And this is the coolest gimmick of the entire game, besides Palmy. The elemental bombs. You start off with the standard fire bomb, which explodes in a cross shape. But later you get the ice bombs, wind bombs, black hole bombs, and so forth. You later use each of these bombs to solve different puzzles, and each one has a different unique ability. Wind bombs can blow you across gaps, ice bombs can create bridges, electric bombs can power machines. It's really cool. Different bombs explode in different shapes. While some explode in a cross shape, others will explode in a circle. Each bomb can be super effective towards specific enemies too, with each bomb having a unique explosion. Some bombs have really cool explosions when you set large quantities of them. So it becomes a strategy game when you need to figure out which bomb to set. In terms of plot, your goal is to defeat each Astral Knight, which are the guardians of these elemental stones. You need to obtain his or her elemental stone and defeat the leader of them all, Rukafel. Every time you complete a level, you'll see a cutscene of Rukafel talking with his Astral Knights. And this makes epic foreshadowing, since you know you'll end up fighting everybody in that room at some point. And when you defeat a level, you'll gain access to 2 new levels, which you can defeat in either order. Depending on the order in which you complete them, you'll sometimes get a different cutscene with Rukafel. Also, Rukafel is quite the menacing villain in terms of appearance, and he has awesome video game music. Just listen! At the end of every level is a gravity generator. In order to complete the level, you have to find the room with the gravity generator and destroy it. For each gravity generator, you have to find 4 smaller pillars located within the same room and destroy each of them. Each gravity generator room utilizes different elemental stones. So it involves quick thinking and precision, which is cool. Now, I forgot to mention that you do have unlimited lives in this game, but there's a catch. If you die 3 times, you will no longer be able to throw or kick bombs, which is typically what you need to complete the rooms of gravity generators. So if you die 3 times but want to explore the rest of the level, you can do that. Then you can restart each level and try to get through it without dying. I think that's actually a really clever way of utilizing lives. You have infinite lives, but once you lose 3, you can't use all your abilities. I think that's awesome. Now, unfortunately, some later levels get really long. The first level on its own takes about an average of 15 minutes to complete. Later levels will take about 30, and I'm not even kidding. So you really gotta really have some time, just sit down and play this game. And the last level can really take about an hour, and that's just when you know what you're doing. But when you complete a level and the game saves, there's just such a sense of accomplishment. You feel glad that you beat the level, and you're ready to tackle another level. And the feeling of accomplishment is so great when you're a child playing a difficult puzzle game like this one. Some puzzles get extremely tricky. You have to create an ice bridge across magma, but if you take too long, your ice platforms will disappear and you'll instantly die in the magma. There's even a pretty cool area where you have to take the second player controller and move Pommy onto a switch in a room full of spikes so that you can move on to the next room. There's other ways to do this if you don't have a second controller, but it's much harder. This is also one of those games where I actually somewhat was interested in the plot. I wanted to know what would happen to Bomberman next. I wanted to know what the next level would be like. How would this boss react to losing to Bomberman? And what would Bomberman and Rukafel feel like if they met? Which they do, by the way. This game also features 2 alternate endings. If you don't want to obtain all the elemental stones, or if you lose to a specific boss fight, you'll get the bad ending. If you obtain all the stones and defeat every boss fight, you get the good ending. The final bosses will vary based on what ending has been settled upon. And they're both pretty difficult. Let me just say that this game has a pretty difficult boss, regardless of which ending you choose. And it's a pretty big plot twist either way, but I shan't spoil that. Now, like I said before, you and your buddy can play this whole game cooperatively, but if you want to go head-to-head with each other, or just want to play the game like an original Bomberman game, you can play the Versus mode. You have 5 different battle options to play in the Versus mode, but you also have to unlock 4 of them by playing against CPUs in a tournament-style game mode, which is kind of cool. You unlock more maps depending on how many bosses you've defeated in the main story, which is also cool. And when you play the Versus mode and your character dies, you can keep playing, which is awesome. In Versus mode, the game works similarly to older Bomberman games. Blow up the opponent and gather items to make your explosions bigger and whatnot. But when your character dies, you become a ghost and you can temporarily take control of another character and try to get them killed. I assure you, it's ridiculous, which makes it really, really fun. The items in the Versus mode are actually really cool too. Some items turn the map invisible, some items turn you invisible, some items cause tornadoes to wreck a town, some cause the controls to be inverted. It just becomes awesome. Some maps just have all the players on one screen, while other maps are so big that each player gets his or her own screen. Each game mode is also pretty cool. Some modes have you defend a king while trying to destroy your opponent's king. Some game modes have you to look through all the items in a map and try to find 2 keys randomly hidden in the level. They're all fun, some more than others, but they're all brilliant. It's just a shame that this game is so underrated. Nowadays, a game like this might be a bit under par compared to today's game standards, but back then, this game was so fun. To this day, I still listen to the music from the game, and I like seeing other people perform different tricks within it. It may not be the most fun to watch, but it's certainly fun to play. And I know Konami bought out Bomberman when they bought out Hudson. So Konami, if you're going to make another Bomberman game, I strongly encourage you to just make one like this game. Heck, you could re-release this game if you want. I know it has the word 64 in the title, so just release it as Bomberman The Second Attack if you have to. Now this is one of my favorite games of all time, which is strange. It's not my favorite. That goes to Yoshi's Island and Super Mario 64 for more obvious reasons. But I assure you, Bomberman 64 The Second Attack is a brilliant game, even to those unfamiliar with Bomberman. I first played it knowing absolutely nothing about Bomberman, and to this day, I love and adore it. Bomberman 64 The Second Attack is an underrated masterpiece with many clever puzzles, a great soundtrack, an awesome versus mode, and a brilliant game design. I strongly encourage everybody to play it. I also have videos on my channel if you want some more gameplay. Thank you for watching. See you all on future videos. Bye-bye, humans.